So welcome to Introducing Particle Systems. In this video we are actually going to get as far as this, which is that we can get our tank, we can fire, and look, it leaves smoke and everything. How cool is that? See you in there. Okay guys, so we want to make a particle system. Now that we don't have the starter content imported, let me show you a neat trick for getting starter content across without bringing all of it across. So go ahead into the Epic Games launcher or just to your Battleground project and make a new project. We're going to make a whole new blank Unreal project with starter content. I'm just going to call the project starter content. And the idea is that once we have an empty starter content project, which you can see forming itself here in the editor, by the way, the settings I used, it doesn't need to be a C++ project. It just needs to be a blank project with starter content. That's all it needs to be. Now, when it opens, if you've got a VR device, it's going to start trying to open all your VR devices, which is going to be a hassle. So just go to your plugins, turn off any plugins that relate to VR that are causing those things to start when you start the project, and just restart it. Then you can close your Oculus and your Vive and whatever else you're lucky enough to have. I have to have those for work, of course, aren't I hard cut done by. So here we go. We have a starter content project. Now what we can do in here is we can go around. Don't change anything in here because that just is a bit of a, well, to be honest, you could enforce that you can't change anything in here by making this particular starter content folder read-only. Let's go ahead and do that actually. So if you go as far as there, we can go and find in Explorer the starter content folder, maybe go up one. What I'm going to do is right-click it, go to Properties, and just make all of it read-only, turn it into a tick, including the subfolders. And now what that means is that if I'm in this starter content project absent-mindedly and I go and try and change something like the explosion, some parameter on here, doesn't matter what these things are at the moment, then it won't let me save it. If you get this box, it's because it won't let you save because the file is not writable, okay? And you can't even make it writable because it's made non-writable by the operating system. Okay, but what we can do in this project is browse things and go, okay, well, maybe this is good for the muzzle flash. It's a good starting point for the muzzle flash. So let's move this into our project. So let's see how to do that. You right-click it, Asset Actions, and Migrate. So in your starter content project, if you've made one, if you haven't, take a breath for a moment to go off and make yourself a starter content project. It's a useful tool to have. Then go find the particle system you want, which we're going to be using P_explosion. Right-click it, Asset Actions, Migrate. Then it'll say, well, do you want to save what you changed? Well, no, because we don't want to save what we changed. We want the one from the starter pack. It then tells you all the stuff that it's going to bring with it, all these textures and materials. You just say, okay. Then the first time it's a little laborious because you have to drill through and find where you want to put it. So in my case, it's Documents, Repos, Unreal, Battle Tank, and it's the content folder you want to point it to of your project. Okay, that's important. Once you found that project, you say, okay, it does a very quick migration, then close the starter content folder. Don't need to save anything. The whole project even, close the whole project. It didn't matter whether you have your Battle Tank project open or not at that time, it will work, but don't have two Unreal projects open at the same time because you'll probably find yourself doing things in one project when you're meant to be doing them in another. Okay, so now look what we've got over here. We have starter content back. Why haven't I gone round in circles? Well, I have. And if we look at source control, it should have picked up the fact that we've added starter content, but there's not much. There's only a little handful of things in here now. Okay, and that's the key, is that we've only got what we need for this P-explosion particle effect. Now, in terms of how you want to organize your assets, you could move the explosion into the projectile if you want to. I'm even going to rename it. I'm going to just click F2 to rename that, and I'm going to call it, whatever we called it in the code, actually. I think we called it Launch Blast. Yeah, I won't look it up. I'm pretty sure it was Launch Blast. Launch Blast, there you go. So now I have a particle effect in projectile called Launch Blast, and its dependencies are sitting in the starter content folder. Now it's entirely up to you if you want to move these textures and materials into the projectile to have all of the projectile assets together. There are so many of them, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to allow myself to have a thin, very minimal, source control tracked starter content folder now, okay, because that's how things end up by default. And if we import other assets, they may want reference these as well. But I will move the actual muzzle blast into the projectile just to say to me, well, these are the things that constitute the projectile. If I want to see the dependencies of the muzzle blast, I can always go to the reference viewer and see what else it needs. Cool. So let's finally get in and actually modify this and look at and understand this particle effect, you want to make sure that you can change things, that you can click save in here in the beginning, and that it hasn't brought over any read-only properties. It hasn't. Now I'm going to talk you through the overview of how this particle system thing works. So you have a viewport. If you don't have any of the windows I mentioned, just click the window menu and bring them up. That is showing you a simulation of how this particle effect is going to look. If you don't like the background color, you can click in the viewport. In the toolbar, click background color, and then maybe turn it into something like a light sky, because that's what we're going to be seeing it against mainly. There you go. So I've changed the background color. The rest of the stuff in this toolbar, we're not going to use that often. Possibly restart sim just to go back to the beginning of the simulation in a longer simulation, a longer effect. But otherwise, I'm not going to be using that toolbar much. Let's hide the tab. Viewport. What else can we do in viewport? Well, a whole bunch of stuff on the left under view. We're not going to use at the moment, but time can be handy. You can slow this thing down to say 10%, click restart, and then you can really carefully look at, say, the beginning of the simulation. So that's what you can do under time. I'm going to leave mine at 100%. Then let's move right. We have emitters. Now, what's emitters all about? Well, this effect is built up from a whole bunch of things. You can turn them on and off with the ticks. So if you just wanted to turn off, say, the shock wave, then you turn that off, and then you get the same effect without the shock wave. If you want to look at the shock wave only, you hit S for solo, and it turns everything else off apart from the shock wave. You can also add the fireball. You can have solo, S for single, but you can have many singles. So why would you have both the ability to have many singles and checkboxes? Well, imagine you had 30 emitters and you wanted to see only 2 of them. You would do that just by going click, click, and you don't have to untick 28 things off to the right. Imagine, on the other hand, you wanted to see 29 of the 30. Of course, the way to do that would just be to unselect the one you don't want. So that gives you quite a lot of flexibility. So the other thing we have here in the middle is a button which changes the render mode, the emitter render mode, for how it displays for debugging. But let's not worry about that one for now. We leave that on what looks like some 10-pin bowling, although it's less than 10. It's 6-pin bowling. And if you click it, you can see down here in details what the render mode is. But let's not worry about that for now. We just don't need it. So details, what does that tell you? Well, it depends what you're selected on. Each emitter will have a different set of details. When you click in the actual top of it, it'll go orange. And if you click down into these what we call modules, like required, spawn, lifetime, initial size, each of those will have a bunch of properties as well. They all have a required. That tells you what material it's using, if any. For example, smoke is created by using a material that is spawned into the world many times, and it's a transparent material. And it tells you where it's being emitted from and how it's aligned to this camera or not. Basically, these things generally are pointing straight at the camera. They're little pieces of transparent cellophane or cardboard, if you like, in real terms. They're just transparent textures that are rendered facing the camera, and they give these effects. You can also choose whether this stuff happens in local or global space. That will become important in a moment. All of these effects, I think, I haven't looked through them all, are in local spaces. You click through the required section. The sparks aren't actually, so the sparks are staying in the world. As you click on this required module, everything but the sparks and the shock wave are in local space, so they'll go with the projectile. Let's see that. If we watch carefully as we fire it, well, actually, we're missing a trick here. You need to go to your projectile blueprint. You need to make the full blueprint editor. On your launch blast, of course, we need to choose the particle system. Under the Details tab, under the Particles template, we choose the launch blast. Compile that. Now let's take a look at the particle system. F11 for full screen. And then let's take a look at it coming out. Okay, so you can actually just see, if you're sharp, that the particles, the sparks, stay where they are in the world, and everything else, like the smoke, goes along with the actual cannonball or with the projectile, okay? So that's the difference between world space and local space. The smoke coming out of the projectile in the world, look, we could fire it, hit F8, and then, probably easier with our thing up, let's just fire once more, possess, fire, F8, pause. Now we could go to that projectile in the world space. But what we want to happen on the projectile is we want it to be leaving smoke behind it. So how are we going to do that? Well, the final thing we need to look at is this curve editor. I want you to remove all curves. That won't change the behavior of the particle effect. Try it. Right-click inside one of these curves down here, remove all curves, and it just means it's plotting nothing. But the particle effect has been unaffected by that. So this smoke emitter here has a lifetime property or module on it. You can add new modules by right-clicking up here, and then adding these modules. There's tons of amazing amount of stuff you can do with particle systems. If you click the little plot icon next to lifetime, it will plot it down here. You can click Fit to fit it to the graph, and you can use the mouse wheel to go in and out. What's this red and green dot? Well, firstly, you can turn that lifetime plot on and off. You may have several different factors that you've added with a little yellow dot here, and then the green and red correspond to something. In this case, what do they correspond to? Well, look in the Details tab. We have a uniform distribution, which means that this smoke will last somewhere between 2 and 3 seconds. You could change that by dragging the 3 up or dragging this up here to say 9 seconds. And now what that means, if we watch this carefully, is that the smoke part of this will now last somewhere between 3 and 9 seconds, different every time. Okay, or 2 and 9 seconds rather. I'm going to reset that to 2 to 3, but that gives some variability. So the general deal with particle systems, have a look on Wikipedia, Wiki Particle Systems. Just have a look at that. It gives you a pretty good overview of what they're like. It talks about the fuzzy phenomena and the spawning of things and the fact that you normally are using a variable amount of time that things last for, etc. Have a look at that. I'll put that in the resources of this lecture for you, okay? So what we're going to do to leave a smoke trail is I'm going to start with the same smoke. So right-click on your smoke and duplicate the emitter. Now you've got two called smoke. So let's right-click. I'm going to choose the right-hand one. They're the same, so it doesn't matter. Rename it to smoke trail. So now we've got a smoke trail to work on. Now the thing that's going to make it different firstly is click the required module of the smoke trail. Go into the Details tab and then go to where it talks about using local space. No, let's go world space. So let's see the effect of that. We've turned off local space on the smoke trail. Play the game, we fire. What do we get? Well, we get smoke that's staying attached to the projectile, but we also get smoke that stays just outside the barrel. But we only get one lump of smoke. What we want is for that projectile to be continuously emitting smoke. So how do you do that? Well, you go to the spawn module there. Under spawn, you go and look, and we're going to make a constant spawn rate. And we're going to have it, or we could have a range if you wanted. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go as constant, and let's just try spawning at, say, 30 per second, okay? So put a spawn rate against the smoke trail emitter of 30 per second. Save that. Maximize your screen fire. Ah, look at that. That's looking better. Its lifetime's too short because the smoke is, I would say, running out too early. So I'm just going to fix that, and then I'm going to challenge you to go ahead and make things how you want them. So click on lifetime. We've got somewhere between 2 and 3 seconds. Let's just make it a constant 30 seconds. Then in code, we can disable this once it hits something. So I've made the lifetime 30 seconds. Let's have a look. Ah, look pretty cool. Apart from the color has gone a bit funny now. So that's probably because we have a color over lifetime. If you have a look here, we have color over lifetime. And you can plot that by clicking the little graph. It'll bring the curves down here. If you've got curves you don't want, remove all curves. Never any harm in doing that. Doesn't change the properties of it. And if you click color over lifetime, which is the one we're interested in, you can turn off alpha over lifetime with that yellow dot. And if we just plot color over lifetime, you can see the red, green, and blue. How do I know that's what it is? Well, just from experience, but you could also come in here and look. And if you drill down far enough, eventually you will see what these things actually mean, in values, out values, etc. And you can see what effect this color over lifetime is going to have. I want it to, if anything, not change very much over its life. So I'm just going to reduce that change. No, okay, so I think what we've got here is we've got, I don't even need, I don't think, color over lifetime. Let's just turn it off. You can temporarily turn it off there. That's fine, but now it doesn't have a color. So we need to maybe make it a constant color over lifetime. So simplify the color over lifetime massively. Make it just a constant black. Let's try that. That's better, but it's taking a while to grow. It's growing too slowly. So that's the size over lifetime. So if I remove all the curves, plot size over lifetime, have a look at that, I could fit it. And the problem I'm finding is it's not growing fast enough, so I just drag that to the left. Hopefully you get the idea. Let's have a look. So it's black, constant. No, something still, you know what it probably is? It's probably transparency over lifetime. So if we plot color over life, one of the things we'll end up with if we turn the others off is alpha over life. Let's plot that. And indeed, alpha over life is taking a while to go up, and actually we don't even want it changing like that. We probably just want a constant alpha over life, and let's just try fully opaque, see how that looks. That looks better to me. Okay, there's 1,000 handles you can pull here. But to be honest, that's good enough. It's fine that the thing stops smoking. What I want you to do now is I want you to go ahead and set up and share your smoke. Tweak the parameters to your taste. Get creative with the color, the size, etc. Don't worry about it disappearing from the side view. Let me just show you that. If we look at the smoke trail from a sufficiently wide camera view, it will just disappear. You see how it disappears there? We'll sort that out in the next lecture. That is a known problem. Don't try and fix it if you want, but I'm going to tell you in the next lecture how to fix it. And then share with the community, there's a link in the resources to our community site, your smoke effect. I love to see it. Get a bit creative with color size, etc., and have fun. Nothing else to do in this video, so the video will end now, and I'll see you in the next one where we'll sort out that camera issue. But please, make your smoke cool and share it with the community.